Okay, the third book, and it's funny because what you just said, I have a section in it that almost verbatim says what you just said, figuring out who you don't want to work with. But it's called, at least at this moment, it's called Story or Die, How to Use Brain Science to Create Your Own Story to Persuade, Convince, and Inspire. And it really is story for the business world, the nonprofit world, even if you're trying to convince your team not to text and drive world, in other words, all of us. And so that's what it goes into. It goes into the same brain science. In some ways, it goes slightly deeper than the other books because...
Hey everybody, I'm Ken Newhouse, and I'm going to welcome you to the Get Clients Now podcast, the show where high-growth consultants and professionals come to access the newest and most effective methods and systems for online marketing, advanced sales and persuasive communication strategies, and automated marketing funnels. And if you're wondering if the Get Clients Now podcast can help you get more high-value clients, enjoy more sales, build a massive tribe, and make more money, you're absolutely going to love this show.
Newhouse's work completely blows everything else that we've ever done with Google out of the water.
I have been looking for a way to grow my presence online, and what I've viewed from Newhouse's work was something that certainly is faster than anything I've seen before.
He says he's going to do something and he does it. He does it in the time frame that he says he's going to do it in. It's exciting when you talk about the results that you're going to get, and you can believe his word because he follows it up with action.
The Newhouse is direct, he's to the point, he tells you what's on his mind, and he backs his words up. From what I know now, from working with him, he's passionate about his work, and he backs it up 100%.
What I like best is you offer something that no one else has out there, which is a pretty comprehensive approach about marketing a system.
If somebody asks me, should they use the Newhouse's team? Absolutely, because you're going to get the important information that you need very, very quickly.
On the internet, on the different marketing techniques, I've never experienced anything like this.
I would definitely recommend Ken Newhouse for someone who's serious about growing their business. I think that your results based on the numbers would at least double the sales in a very short time frame.
Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here from kennewhouse.com, and I'm going to welcome you back to the Get Clients Now podcast, where the one-size-fits-all marketing model is dumb, the client-centric business model is king, and successful business owners and industry experts share methods that get you clients so you can accelerate brand acceptance, skyrocket your significance in the marketplace, and elevate your status, allowing you to build your tribe with certainty. Today is episode number 348 of the Get Clients Now podcast, and on today's episode, we're going to be speaking with Lisa Cron. Lisa is a best-selling author of multiple books, which include Wired for Story and Story Genius. She's sold millions and millions and millions of copies of her books. But Story Genius is going to be the topic of our episode today, is a book that teaches you how to craft and tell magnetic, riveting stories so you can sell a lot more of your stuff. Now, as everybody knows, learning how to tell stories in your sales and marketing, actually in all areas of your business, has become more important than ever. And if we put everything with the coronavirus off to the side for just a moment, I know that's kind of a hot topic right now. Certainly, we don't want to dismiss it. It's very, very important. It's unfortunate. It's a reality we have to deal with, but let's just, for the moment, stick that off to the side and look at the facts. Storytelling, as a skill for use in business, specifically in marketing and in sales, has been one of the hottest topics being talked about online, offline as well, going all the way back to right before Christmas in 2019, which is absolutely amazing. Now, before we actually bring Lisa in on the show, I want to make a very, very important announcement, and then want to actually respond to another great question that was submitted from one of the show's fans, someone who's actually been a subscriber and a member of the Get Clients Now Nation for 4 months, I think it is, maybe 5, I'm not sure, I'd have to look it up. But the important announcement, I want to make that first, is that I want to remind you that I've taken our $997 Selling with Social Proof video testimonial system, where I teach you how to use social proof in the form of video testimonials, so you can let your clients, your customers, and patients do the selling for you. Well, I've updated that, and I've added the most current research we have on brain science, persuasion, and how to activate what are known as internal decision triggers in the mind of your clients and prospects. And right now, you can access that training 100% free, and I'll explain why I'm doing that in just a second. But by activating internal decision triggers in your prospects and clients, you literally create a mental frame where the prospect or the client makes the decision that you want them to make, and at the same time, they think that they've actually made that decision on their own, which is very, very powerful. Now, as I've mentioned in previous episodes of the Get Clients Now podcast, these videos literally are some of my best stuff. And as I just mentioned, you can access them 100% free right now on my website, kennewhouse.com. I want to also mention that there's nothing for sale in these videos. Because again, as I've mentioned, I'm giving you access to the training to create interest in a new live training that I'm going to be doing in June. That's Social Proof Profits. So if in fact you decide to watch the social proof selling videos, the video testimonial system videos that I have up for you right now, you watch them and you decide, hey, listen, I got to buy something from this guy. This is really, really good. I want to buy Social Proof Profits. Well, I got news for you. You can't. It's not for sale. There is no option to buy that or anything with these videos. Nothing at all. It's impossible. So if after watching these videos, you discover that this is exactly what you're missing from your marketing and sales efforts, your campaigns, your program, you're going to have an option to get your name on what's called the early bird notification list for the training, the live training that's coming up, Social Proof Profits. So what exactly is the early bird notification list? Well, it's just as it sounds. It's a list of people who want to be notified of when the registration is going to be open for Social Proof Profits. And you're going to be notified 24 hours in advance over the general public. Now, you can access the free training videos today. Again, like I said, by going to kennewhouse.com, and at the top of the page, you're going to see a big blue button. In fact, it's the only blue button on the homepage of my website, and it says something to the effect of new videos, new training, something like that. I have to actually look at it again. But anyway, all you got to do is click on that button. Once you click on the button, you're going to get immediate access to the training. Nothing to buy, nothing like that at all. Like I said, there is nothing for sale in these videos. It is straight 110% content. And if you're like me, and if you're like my most successful clients and members, you're going to absolutely love it. This is the most current stuff in brain science that we have, and then how to actually get testimonials from your clients, customers, and patients. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, hey, listen, we're in the midst of a pandemic. We're all isolated. We can't get face-to-face with people in order to get their testimonials. Well, guess what? We have a thing called Zoom. We have a thing called GoToMeeting. We have a thing called Skype. We have a thing called FaceTime on our iPhones. So the list of tools available to us that would allow us to capture these video testimonials from our clients, customers, and patients is endless. So there's no excuse for you not to do this now. In fact, right now is the prime opportunity to take advantage of this. So if you have established relationships with clients, customers, and patients, what you want to do is watch these videos, watch and see where I actually show you how to do the interviews, how to actually construct your questions, what kind of outcome-based videos you want. And that's certainly based on the type of business that you have. But there's a science to this, a step-by-step process. And so one of the other things that's really, really important about you taking advantage of this is this. As we come out of this pandemic, as we start to actually open up the marketplace, everybody is not just going to bum rush the marketplace and start buying things again and going to stores and restaurants and buying your stuff. What are they going to do? They're going to look to the companies that they can actually, the brands that they can actually trust the most. What's that mean? That's going to require all of us to institute elements of trust into our business model, into our marketing. And one of the best ways you can generate trust is through social proof. And one of the best ways to utilize social proof so you can attract more leads, convert more prospects, get more clients, and sell a lot more of your stuff is through the use of social proof selling video testimonials. So this is an absolute game changer for when we start to come out of the coronavirus pandemic that has shut all of us down. So now that I've covered that, let's go ahead and look at the question that I got from Andy Young. I'm going to go ahead and give Andy a response to his question. I'm going to answer it because I thought it was a really, really well thought out, a very well written question that he submitted to us. And here's his question. Quote, over the last couple of weeks, you've been telling us to increase the amount of touch points we have with our clients, our prospects, and people in the marketplace. You mentioned that we shouldn't be hard selling right now. And in light of everything that's going on, I think that makes a lot of sense. When I write emails, blog posts, or create videos, are there any steps that I can take that are going to help me to be viewed or perceived as a person of influence? I want my tribe and I want people in the marketplace to look to me for guidance. I want them to see me, I guess you could say, as their quote-unquote leader. Is there a certain process that I can use in my written and video communications to be perceived as a person of influence, not only within my tribe, but within the marketplace? Now, again, like I said, Andy, that is an absolutely awesome question. It's a very well thought out question, and it's a very well written question. So number one, thank you for submitting it. And number two, thanks for being a fan and subscriber and member of the Get Clients Now Nation. I genuinely and truly appreciate all of you who are fans of the show and who have actually subscribed to the show. Now, I'm going to go ahead and answer Andy's question, but let me say this first. We're getting a lot of positive feedback from me actually answering these email questions that you guys are submitting. So even though it's actually creating a lot of extra work for me, I'm going to go ahead and test something out, right? So you guys, what I want you to do is I want you to keep sending your questions via email to customerservice@kennewhouse.com. And then I'm going to answer the most relevant question. I'm going to pick one question every week on the show. So if you guys are ready, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the answer that I've put together for Andy's question. Now, if you want to gain maximum influence with your tribe, with your marketplace, with your prospects, there are essentials, 4 pillars, as I call them, for influence. And I'm going to actually run through those right now. And for the sake of time, I'm going to be brief. Literally, guys, we could take each one of these 4 that I'm going to give you, and I could do an entire podcast, multiple podcasts on each one. But I think I'm going to give you enough information for each one. It's going to make sense to you, and you're going to be able to take this information and implement it immediately. And it's going to help you tremendously within the marketplace so that they see you as a more influential person. And then after I've run through this series of answers in the outline that I have here relative to Andy's question, we're going to go ahead and dive into the interview because after all, we've got one of the world's leading authorities on how to craft compelling, magnetic, and powerful stories you can use to, number one, stand out in the marketplace, and more importantly, so you can sell a lot more of your stuff. Well, we got her waiting in the green room, and that would be Lisa Cron. So Lisa is a fabulous guest. Definitely looking forward to the interview. So let's go ahead and start with the answer that I have for Andy's question. So the first pillar that's involved in you becoming a person of influence so that your marketplace perceives you as a person of influence is fascination. You know, fascination is something that goes far beyond interest, right? So your prospects, number one, they need to be fascinated with you. And when I talk of fascination, I want you to think of characters, say, from your favorite fiction novels. So as an example, if we're going to look at a fictional book, we could look at Lee Childs and the character he created, Jack Reacher. And this fictional character, Jack Reacher, has literally inspired hundreds of thousands of people to pre-order his books every time there's an announcement of a coming release. People pre-order these books by the hundreds of thousands. And people are fascinated with Jack Reacher, and they simply cannot wait to find out what this character is going to do next. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of writers who have created fictional characters so that people are fascinated with them, not just interested, they are fascinated, they are engrossed in these characters, and this is something you want to strive to create in your marketing. So pillar number 2 is that you want your clients, you want the marketplace, your prospects, your patients, your customers, you want them to have shared common values with you. Now, let me just say this before we really start to unwrap pillar number 2. You are absolutely fighting an uphill battle if you're attempting to influence people who have dramatically different values than you do. So as an example, look at the presidential election that's coming up later this year. No matter how obvious it is that Donald Trump is the best, most qualified person to run the country, millions of people are going to be voting for Joe Biden because of the values that they hold. So as it relates to the marketplace you're working in, realize that not only should your marketing not appeal to those who have dramatically different values than yours, but your marketing should repel them by design. Listen carefully to what I'm saying here. You want to repel the people who, because of their values, would never become your client, your customer, or your patient, or if they did, they would be like the worst nightmare you can imagine to deal with. Those are the people that you want to absolutely do everything you can to prevent them from becoming your client, your customer, or your patient. Now, on the other hand, what I'm not saying is that you want to repel people that have any values that are different from yours. You know, if you tried to operate your business based on that principle, you'd go broke. So let me give you an example. You know, I'm an advocate for advertising because I've learned that advertising, when done correctly, meaning that the copy is good, the media is right, and the market I'm targeting is the right market, advertising is one of the best ways for a business owner to generate wealth. And that, of course, is assuming that you've got a legitimate business that's delivering exceptional value to the marketplace. I mean, go figure, right? So because I'm an advocate of advertising, I'm never going to accept someone as a client who is against advertising, like the kind of person who would rather die than invest a dime in advertising their business, whatever that might be. So those are the kind of people that have distinctly different values than I do. Pillar number 3, they have to believe that you care about them. So people actually have to believe that your interactions are more than about simply getting their money. They need to believe you actually have a concern for their personal welfare and that you want them to do very, very well. This is completely contrary to the odds of people succeeding in general. Let me explain. 80 to 90% of the people who buy from you aren't going to do well with anything you sell them. Whether it's information, whether it's a tool, whatever it is, they're not going to do well with what you give them, even if it's guaranteed to work. This means that if you worry yourself with every single person getting results based on what you're teaching or selling them, you're going to drive yourself crazy. I learned this lesson firsthand, I guess it was about 15 years ago, when one of my clients, Dr. Jim Asawala, this was a chiropractor who lived in Lake St. Clair, Michigan. So Jim originally signed up as a silver member in my coaching program. Then he moved up to gold. Then he actually purchased the most expensive marketing system I had for chiropractors at the time. And that was, of course, my $1 million marketing system. About 2 months, I think it was about 2 months after purchasing that system, and that system was $1,997, Jim called me up and told me that he wanted to hire me for one-on-one coaching. So I'm thinking, Jim has gone through my system. He's loving everything. He's been a member now for quite a while. Things are working out really, really well for him. So I accepted Jim as a client, and the program that he ended up purchasing was a $20,000 program. This was my most expensive program. Now, part of that coaching program actually required that I travel to my client's office. So I actually flew up to Jim's office. I spent, I think 3 or 4 days with him. And then for the remainder of the 12 months, I would do a coaching call every other week with Jim. I think it was about a half an hour coaching call, and then help him with his copy and his ads and things like that. But anyway, flew up to his office. First morning I come to his office. Staff takes me back to his personal office. He's with a patient, adjusting a patient or two. I don't really remember how many people he saw. So I walk into his office. I sit down. I'm hearing all this noise and commotion out in the office. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up and close the door behind me. So I get up to close the door, and there's a doorstop. Lo and behold, you will never imagine, in a million years, you'll never guess what the doorstop was. The doorstop was my $1 million marketing system, still in the box, unopened, unused. Talk about shock. I just went back over and sat down, didn't shut the door or anything else, and I sat there completely befuddled, completely shocked. I mean, there's no other way to put it. So as I'm sitting there waiting for Jim, I immediately start to feel guilty, like, this guy hasn't used my stuff, and, I don't know if I feel good about keeping his money. This is like $2,000 here. He actually needs to use my system because it's going to help him. So as I'm thinking this, Jim walks into his office. Imagine this in your head. Takes his foot and then shoves my box out of the way, the box of my stuff that he bought, my system. And then without missing a beat, he says, "Hey, Ken, how was your flight?" And I'm just sitting there staring at him in total disbelief. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Jim, my stuff is being used as a doorstop? You paid $2,000 for that system and you haven't even opened it. And on top of that, Jim, you just paid me $20,000 for one-on-one coaching, and the system you bought hasn't even been used." And then he said to me, "Ken, everybody knows, you're the guy, and that's why I hired you. But I've been really, really busy. I haven't been able to do that, and I'll get to it the next week or so. Besides, Ken, you did your part. You created the system, and you sold it to me. Whether I use it or not has nothing to do with you, so don't worry about it. I bet there's a lot of people that buy things like this and never use them. And in my mind, you shouldn't be losing sleep over any of those people." So after I sat there for a few minutes and thought about it, I came to the realization, he's right. And so fast forward to where we are now. What I'm trying to tell you is this. You need to get over worrying about whether people who buy your stuff are going to use it or not. And on the flip side of that, this is important. This is a writer downer. You need to have total, genuine concern for and really take care of the people who do use your stuff, or else you're going to be paralyzed in your marketing. Everybody knows this saying, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And the longer I'm in the game of consulting and information marketing, the more I find this to be true. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that being successful is purely about demonstrating expertise. But you're not going to get past their built-in sales prevention firewall, which is something we all have ingrained into our DNA, but your messaging won't get past this firewall until they know that you actually care about them, the results, and their outcome on a very, very personal and emotional level. Now, just a quick note, I go into the topic of the sales prevention firewall and how to get around it effortlessly in those new free videos that I told you about on social proof selling that you can find on my website at kennewhouse.com. Remember the big blue button at the top of the page? I cover how to get around the sales prevention firewall in these new videos, so be sure to check out those videos. Okay, let's take a look at pillar number 4. People have to get value from the relationship. You always have to keep in mind that when I say value in this context, it's value as your prospects define it. It's value as your clients, customers, patients define it, which in many, many cases can be vastly different than how you and I define it. In fact, this is another one of those huge mistakes that I see new members making when they first come to me. There is no doubt that what they're delivering to the marketplace has tremendous value to them in their eyes. The problem for them is that the marketplace, their prospects, their clients, their customers, their patients, haven't placed the same level of value on what they're offering, and that's because they're looking for that quote-unquote something else that they've actually placed even greater value on. So how do you know that you're doing the process that I'm explaining to you correctly? How do you know that this is going to work for you? First, you want people telling your stories back to you and then tell you their same story. So if you get face-to-face with your clients, you get them on the phone and people are relating their stories of like coming back and recovering from bankruptcy, just like I did after being hit by the dump truck in 1994. Remember, I got hit head on by a dump truck in 1994 due to no fault of my own, lost everything, went bankrupt, got it all back. Sad story, but great ending to the story. Or you get the story of how their dog died as well. When you hear these types of things coming back at you, you've actually established a great connection with this particular prospect or client, customer, patient, whoever it might be. So as an example, our dog Dallas, which was actually, truth be told, that was the beautiful and talented Lisa's dog, right? A little Chihuahua. Dallas actually died, I guess, about 2 years ago. And when I shared that with our members and clients, and then when I shared that on the podcast, I probably had at least a dozen people tell me a story of when their dog died. In addition to people sharing their stories with you, you should also be getting emails and like snail mail from people relating these shared experience stories with you. Okay, so on the flip side of that, how do you know you're doing this wrong? Well, you know you're doing this wrong when people are just talking to you about the mechanics of what it is that you do, right? You need people involved with you if you want to keep them fascinated by and connected to you. Keep that in mind. The second thing you need to understand here that'll tell you that you're doing this right is that people are telling your stories to other people and preferably giving you the credit. Now, before I cover this one, let me share a quick note on receiving personal mail from people, okay? From your prospects, your clients, customers, things like that. When you get mail from someone, like you get a letter, a card, anything like that, acknowledge it and respond to it personally and do it immediately. Do not overlook this or take these people for granted. Now, your response doesn't have to be long, but you're going to lose people by failing to acknowledge and respond. So if you're influencing your tribe and using these strategies the right way, I would say that about 2 to 5% of your clients, the people on your list, your clients and members, should be communicating with you in the ways that I just mentioned. And as far as first-timers, people that are new members of your tribe, new clients, new customers, new coaching group members, whatever it might be, you really need to especially pay attention to these people because this can set, make, or break the relationship forever. Last, number 5. People should be seeking your approval, and I just kind of touched on this in number 4, but you know you're getting this right when people are showing you their papers, and they literally, it's like a kid, they want you to hang it up on the refrigerator. So for me, this actually occurs when members of the Get Clients Now Nation, members of our coaching group, individual clients, especially new clients, start emailing me examples of their campaigns or their ads using the principles that I've taught them and sending me stuff that's actually working for them, which is pretty much most of the time. Now, an added benefit to this is this. When you're getting these types of examples from your coaching group members, your clients, people who read your newsletter, whatever it is, people who listen to my podcast, it also makes creating content much, much easier. In my case, makes creating content for my show, this show, the Get Clients Now podcast, much, much easier. It makes content that I create for my newsletter for private coaching group members, makes that much, much easier because I get to include examples, whether they're good or bad, along with my comments into my newsletter, into the podcast. And you should be doing the same exact things in your communications. Now, in addition to that, it's also important that your people, your tribe, your members, your clients, these people should care about you personally as well. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up now. But listen, when members of your tribe respond to you like this, when they send you notes and cards and gifts and recommendations and well wishes like this, you know that you're managing the relationship the right way. So take the things that I've told you, Andy, write them down. I'm going to actually make a PDF of this outline available in the show notes on the website. So when you go to kennewhouse.com, go to episode number 348, and you'll see a link in the show notes on that page where you can just download this entire process that I gave you along with the rest of the show. And definitely if you follow these steps, if you implement them, I guarantee you, you will immediately and instantly be perceived as a person of influence within the marketplace, especially amongst your tribe, your members, and your prospects. Okay, so now that I've covered that, let's cover Lisa Cron's bio, and then we'll welcome her in on the show. Lisa Cron is the author of Wired for Story and Story Genius. Her video course, Wired for Story, How to Become a Story Genius, can be found at creativelive.com. And then she has another course called Writing, the Craft of Story at lynda.com. Her TEDx talk, Wired for Story, opened Furman University 2014 TEDx Conference. Lisa's worked in publishing at W.W. Norton and John Muir Publications, as an agent at the Angela Rinaldi Literary Agency, as a producer on shows for Showtime and Court TV, and as a story consultant for Warner Brothers and the William Morris Agency since 2006. In 2021, she's got a new book that's coming out, and that book is specifically designed and written for the business world, and the title of that book is Story or Die, how to use brain science to create your own story to convince, persuade, and inspire. And like I said, that book's going to be available in March of 2021. Now, she's got an incredibly long bio, and I'm not going to read all that now. Her website is wiredforstory.com. But if you look in the show notes, I'll have her complete bio as well as a link to the courses that she has available. This is really cool stuff. I can't believe she's making these available to you guys, but I'll put those links in the show notes along with links to her books. So if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and welcome Lisa Cron in on the show. Okay, everybody, Ken Newhouse here. I want to welcome you to this episode of the Get Clients Now podcast. And today we have a very special guest, someone who almost didn't make it onto the show due to no fault of her own, and that is multiple best time selling author Lisa Cron. Lisa, I want to welcome you on behalf of myself and the members of the Get Clients Now Nation. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
It's fabulous to be here. These days, everything is virtual, so it's like
it is.
Everybody's communicating right now, as opposed to just us.
Yes, I'm actually used to it because we do this with the show all the time. But, Lisa, I had actually sent I think it was on your website where I filled out I read both of your books. I'm looking forward to the third book, which is coming out in March of 2021. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But I read Wired for Story, fabulous book. I read Story Genius, which takes it to a whole nother level, which is just an absolute literary masterpiece, I guess, if I say that correctly. Listen, if you want to learn how to write stories or tell stories, and that's my whole gig, is I want to learn how to tell better stories and writing as well, not for the sake of a novel, but these are just masterpieces. But I sent an email to Lisa and I said, hey, listen, we're doing a series on the whole topic of stories. Had all these other experts on, but Lisa, as I told you before, you were like the pinnacle of the people that I wanted to get. You were the top dog. And I say that lovingly and respectfully and very professionally. And I didn't hear back from Lisa. And then that was in December. And then like 2 months later, I got an email that said, hey, by the way, I did respond to you. I would love to be on your show. And I'm like, what? I'm like, who's this? And it was you. So thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for picking up the slack and doing the show.
I'm very happy to be here.
So let's do this. I've got a couple questions. Mm-hmm. Obviously I've covered your bio in the introduction, but I've got a couple questions that I ask every guest. So if you could take a minute or two, just give us enough of your backstory so we kind of make sense of the show today. Some people obviously aren't going to know who you are. I think most people do know who you are in my audience. They're prolific readers for the most part. And so I've already mentioned your book. I don't know how many times, like a bazillion times, both of your books on previous episodes. Because they're just that good. I like to share with our members the books that I read. But if you could give us a little backstory, tell us what we need to know about you that got you from at any point you want to start to the point of being one of the most well-known leading experts in the entire world on how to write killer, fabulous, awesome stories, how to tell a story.
Okay. Here's the thing. When I started, I've loved stories since I was a little kid. Really a little kid. Going way back when I was 12, I decided to see every movie that was ever made. And I did for a long time. And when I left college, what I wanted actually to be a writer. And to tell you the truth, I didn't have the courage. I didn't know what to do. So I went into publishing, which I loved. So I was in publishing for a while, and I worked at W.W. Norton. And at that point, anybody who wanted to could also be a reader. Like we could also take home manuscripts and read them. And so I did that as well. And I started to notice that what I thought what made a good writer, what I thought made a good novel or memoir, was the opposite. And that was really interesting. What was grabbing me, what pulled me in, had very little to do with anything I'd ever been taught about story. It actually had to do with the way the characters were making sense of what was going on. And if that wasn't happening, if I couldn't feel what they were feeling based on what they were going through on the page, it didn't matter what was happening. It didn't matter how beautifully it was written. It didn't matter about the great big giant things that were happening in the plot. In fact, birth, death, fall of the Roman Empire, it could be shockingly boring to the place where you think, like, is there something wrong with me that I'm not, moved by, people being mowed down? So kind of once I went into that, the rest of my career up to when I actually started writing about it was doing the same thing. I worked in television production. I then worked reading books to film for Warner Brothers and for the William Morris Agency back before they joined with Endeavor. And it was exactly the same thing. At that point, I was reading thousands of manuscripts, and I would have to do, most of you guys, if you started to read what I was reading, you'd go, okay, yeah, forget it, and you'd put it down. I had to read it to the end.
Oh, no.
To say why it did, or way more likely, didn't work. And that's when I really started to see and really started to, for lack of a better term, codify what it was that was pulling me in. And at that point, I sort of thought of it as, well, this is like my theory. And lucky for me, serendipity of all of it is that neuroscience was really taking off at that point.
Sweet.
And I was fascinated by how does the brain work? Because as they say, writers were the first neuroscientists. There's a book, I think it's Jonah Lehrer, who's fallen from grace. And I think the title of one of his books was Proust is the first neuroscientist. And it's true because neuroscientists and writers and you guys are really trying to figure out what makes people tick. What are we really thinking? What do we really mean when we say what we say? And that's what stories do. That's what neuroscience does. And by studying the neuroscience, it was easy to see that, wait a minute, what I thought as my theory turned out to be biological fact. And I cannot begin to tell you how thrilling that was.
I can imagine. That's awesome.
The most thrilling. And also, for all the good and bad that we can say about the internet and, everything being digital, the beauty of it was that I could then go and I could start to read neuroscience papers that, 30 years ago, how could you ever, you'd read something in a book and that book would be already 2 years old. And then they would quote some sort of what am I trying to say? A PhD thesis or some esoteric. And how would you ever find that? You couldn't. But now I would read an article and it would quote other articles, and literally within 3 minutes, I could be reading it online, the original source material. And that was just fascinating. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. At one point, I thought, when I was writing Wired for Story, I thought, well, I want to see what's being taught out there in cognitive psychology. What are they actually teaching? So I ponied up and I bought a textbook, and they're expensive.
Yes, they are. Yes.
It's like $150 for this textbook, but I go, okay, I'm going to take a look. And here's the really interesting thing. I was reading it, and the information in it was literally 10 years out of date. 10 years out of date. I was reading things where I knew I had just read a study that completely debunked what I was reading. So it was just, we can be on the cutting edge at this point. So, that was basically it. And I knew that when it came to writing and writers, I was teaching something that was the opposite of what everybody else was teaching. And I felt, and I'm not shy about saying this, and I say this to writers all the time, that everything you know about writing, everything you know about story is wrong because it's taught wrong everywhere. And so that's what, led me to write the book, led my wonderful editor at the time at 10 Speed to go, yeah, I want this book. And that's what sort of catapulted me out there, because when the first one came out, Wired for Story, which was 2012, so it's 8 years ago, just about now, not quite. I was on as many business shows as I was on writing shows because, and this is the thing, story, regardless of the format, regardless of genre, it's not, story in the way that we think of it now, which is kind of a problem because we tend to think of story as quote unquote soft science, because when you think of stories, you think of novels or TV shows or movies or, that sort of thing. Whereas story is really built into the architecture of our brain. It's how we make sense of everything. So any story you hear that anybody tells you is based on this exact same principle because it's again, it's not theory, it's biological fact. It's how we process information. And the more we can dive into that and understand it, the better you are at, convincing anybody of anything.
It was after I read your first book that I really started to, I've been a direct response copywriter for over 20 years. And I was always looking for that extra thing that could make me even better. And it was after I read your first book, Wired for Story, that I started to notice and actually pay attention to the conversations, not only that I was having, that everyone was having. And it's always a story. Mm-hmm. Like virtually every time there's a dialogue between two people, they're sharing stories, and that's the communication. And I started looking at commercials on television. And then I started just to look at, not only just TV shows and just all these different things, even on game shows or whatever. And I'm not a television watcher at all. I'm a reader. But it's all story. And then I started to realize, hey, this is really a big deal. This is something I need to learn and really dive into. And then I realized, hey, listen, you know virtually nothing about this. This is a huge topic. So I started looking for, like I said, the people who were the leading experts in the world. That's how I came across you. Just one quick thing I want to say before I jump into my second question. Two things I want to say. First, guys, I don't care if you're aspiring to be a writer or not. All of these principles cross directly over into the business setting because, like the title of her book says, we are all wired for story. And so if you can become a master storyteller, and whether you're going to be writing or using actual stories in the form of oral communication, this is the keys to the kingdom. I'm telling you right now, this is that good. It's really, really good stuff. My second point is this. So again, don't write this off and say, I'm not a writer. Don't check out. This is definitely what you want to know. Secondly, Lisa, you mentioned reading all these manuscripts. This wasn't something I planned, but why not? I've been working on this manuscript. I've been writing by hand now, and I just thought it's the writing's kind of small, and it's in this little, what is this, like a 2x3, 2.5 by 3 little Missouri Tigers spiral notebook here. So I'm going to send it. I'm just kidding. I was just thinking, I wonder how many people actually ask her, hey, could you look at this manuscript for me? I've been working.
Funny story about that. If you want to just take one, I at one point tore the meniscus on my knee. And this was about 10 years ago in a bike accident. And I was going to have it through arthroscopic surgery, like sewn up. And they were putting me out. And the doctor asked me what I did. And at that point, I was a literary agent. And I said, I'm a literary agent. And he said, oh, my mother wrote a novel. Would you mind reading it? And it's like, I'm going, yes, as long as I survive this, I am happy to do it.
Yeah, what are you going to say,
Exactly. That was the strangest moment where someone asked me, would you take a look at this?
Did you take a look at it?
Yeah, it was terrible.
I can imagine. So, yeah, tell them after the fact. So. Yeah. Lisa, the second question that I like to ask all of our guests is, do you have any mentors, or do you have any experiences or anything that may have happened to you in your life that really shaped your decision and your path to go in the direction that you've gone on now? Something maybe that really inspired you or motivated you?
Well, I would say two things. The first thing was just being annoyed at the writing world. I mean, to get into what I got into, I did not. I did everything completely by myself, largely because when I feel like I'm really right about something and I get a lot of pushback, if I really feel like I'm right after I listen to everything, I push really hard. So seeing that I really felt like everything that was taught out there was wrong, it galvanized me to go out and kind of bit by bit do this on my own. And I would kind of try to bring in, partners, people who could do it. And I didn't find anyone else with the same fire under them. So I ended up really, truly just doing it myself over the period of about 20 years, really coming to where I am now. So on that level, no, it was just internal anger about, if once I knew something, if someone was going to say something that was the opposite, I would marshal everything so I could prove them wrong 6 ways from Sunday. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and often do. And so there was that part of it. But in terms of the business part, and in terms of the really trying to figure out how to take it out into the world and what to focus on, I do have a mentor and someone who I think is fabulous. And you've actually come across her work because it's within Story Genius, and her name is Jenny Nash, and she is amazing. We both taught at UCLA Extension in the writers program. And when you were in the writers program, you could take each other's courses for free. And so she took a course I had online, and I hadn't written anything yet. I wanted to write Wired for Story, and she had written a bunch of novels. And I said, God, yeah, I'd like to, but I kind of need a coach. And she said, oh, I'll coach you. I could do that. And that changed both our lives. because she is now this uber writing coach. She's got a company called Author Accelerator. She now trains other people to be coaches to help other writers. And she is so good and so focused on the business part of it, which completely is not my skill set at all. I mean, like, I couldn't be less. So yeah, without her, I don't think, I mean, the second book, Story Genius, I wrote it because my editor at 10 Speed said, she said, I was thinking of writing a novel, and I went to look for books on how to do it, like how to outline or how to go in and start. And there was nothing. Do you want to write one? And I was like, okay, I think I could do that. But the reason I could is because the minute I wrote Wired for Story and I wanted to sit down and go, just kind of bask in it's done and it's out there, you know, that feeling where you think, you know, I can relax for a minute. And the first thing Jenny said to me was, okay, now you've got the theory. How are you going to go out and teach that? What are you going to do? What's your method going to be? What is that? And she didn't let me rest until I came up with a method. And then that became, you know, a couple of years later, that became Story Genius. So yeah, I mean, big shout out to Jenny. She has got the drive that I would give. I mean, I feel the same thing about her as I do about Stephen King. If I found out they were from a different planet, I'd be relieved because I don't know how anybody can do so much so quickly, so well.
I read his book, is it called On Writing or something like that, many, many years ago when people were telling me, hey, there's like, to be a good copywriter, you got to be able to write. That's when I first started hearing about story and things like that. And I'm like, well, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You know, it was just a whole different style. But the more advanced I get at doing this, the more I realize that this is everything. This is the foundation. This is all of it. I mean, if you can write or tell a good story, you can accomplish virtually anything. And I mean that literally. You know, I was thinking the other night, and I don't remember the gal's name, but I was reading her work. She outlines the 6 different types of stories. You're probably familiar with her. And I don't know what it was, but it just struck me. And I'd actually been reading, I read through again, Wired for Story, some of the information in that, and then also the second book. But it just struck me that story, and I just want to get your comment on this. My vision of what a story is, correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm right. I don't know either way, but just how I see it as from a business perspective, this is a powerful tool where I can literally, if I'm good at it and I know how to do it, I can take my prospect, the person that I'm communicating with, I can take them, it's a tool that allows me to literally take them to a place, not literally, but figuratively, take them to a real place that exists in between their ears where they can see and experience the same emotions that I am or the emotions that I want them to. I can shape the entire experience. Now, they might have different thoughts than I do or whatever else, because that's just the nature of people. We all have our map of the world that exists prior to reading a story. So 10 people could read a story and see it, you know, get the 10 different things from, you know, this was most meaningful to me out of the story. But for all intents and purposes, it's a tool where I can literally, figuratively speaking, transport my prospect to a place where I have this ability to help shape their emotions and how they see things so they can see exactly what I'm seeing, what I want them to see. So whether it's the benefits of what I'm trying to get them to invest in, a feeling I want them to have. And when I really saw that for the first time, I'm like, this is really, I mean, I don't believe in magic, but it's almost like magic that you could have a tool like this. And so that's why it's really important to me to learn this. And the more I learn, the less I realize that I understand this process. And that's why I'm really glad you're on the show today. So based on what I just said, what are your thoughts on that? Expand on it, cut it apart, whatever you want to do with it. I want to know if I'm on the right trail with this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the difference between a story that is in a novel or a memoir or a television show is that at the end of the day, to some degree, you can take it like you said, and you're going to think one thing, believe another thing. But basically, all stories make a point. All stories make a point, and they begin making that point from the very first word. When you're writing a story to convince someone of something, that is what you want them to walk away with. They might have slightly different thoughts, but you want to take them through something so at the end of the day, they not only hear your call to action, but they really feel like it's their idea. They really feel like that's something that they want to do and that it makes them be, and this is such an overused term and it's general, and I don't like generalities at all, but just for the sake of brevity, it makes them feel like their most authentic self. You've tapped into something in them that makes them feel like, to be myself, this is what I want to do. And then they're taking your idea out as if it was their own and they're trumpeting it. But the difference is when you're writing a story to change how somebody else sees something is that you have to really understand them to begin with and their mindset to begin with. And then you will craft the story in order to speaking to their own story. In other words, if your story doesn't speak to their story, you're going to just alienate them because you're going to say things or things are going to happen and they are just going to feel like, okay, my tribe wouldn't do that or that I'm turned off to that. And they're going to just shut you down and argue back. If you've told a story, and this is why so much work has to be done before you can create it. It's not about just showing them how great your product is or your idea is or what you want them to do is, because they don't care. I mean, the irony is when you're telling somebody a story, because we come to every story, any kind of story, unconsciously, in our cognitive unconscious, asking this one question, which is, what am I going to learn here that's going to help me better make it through the night? What
Absolutely.
am I going to And so you have to tailor what you're saying to a story that they can, or an experience that jives with the way that they see the world and the way they see themselves. And then at the end of the day, they come out, something's shifted because by definition, you're asking them to do something they're not already doing. So you're showing them why this makes them their more authentic self than the way that they were before. And that's why, story is everything. But without that first bit of work, because what story's about, and again, we can get into this in a second, but just a little preview, what story's about, it's not about what happened. Story's not about an external change. Story's about an internal change. When we're tracking a story, we're not tracking the big giant things that are happening, whether they're big, small, or, or somewhere in between. We're tracking how those big things, how that thing that a person, problem or something a person can't avoid, how that changes how they see things.
Right.
And that is the heart and soul of story. And again, that's something that's simply not taught. And that is the point. And diving into that and creating a story that makes whether you're telling a story about yourself or you have a main character or protagonist, even if the story is, like 3 or 4 sentences, that's what your audience is tracking, how they are responding to what's happening, why they're responding to it, and what's happening makes them then realize as a result, and how that then causes them to take, hopefully, the action that you want them to take.
I think that's, you said a couple different things there that were just right on, but coming from a different angle from what I do. First of all, NLP, I talked about the map of the world. So you have to know, this is where coming in to know your perfect prospects, your map, their map, understanding them. It's not about you. It's about them, really. So having that intimate knowledge of your perfect prospects, what's going to appeal to them, their backstory, so on and so forth. But then also you talked about internal decisions. So they come to the realization that, hey, this is a decision I've made on my own. Those are the decisions that stick. An internal decision. That's one of the reasons why I'm an absolute advocate and a fan and a proponent, an outspoken one, for utilizing outcome-based video testimonials in your business, because people are sharing their story, and those people oftentimes share a similar backstory to the people who are watching them, whether you're a dentist, a chiropractor, a consultant, an author, whatever. Like the people who read your books, that's your tribe. So if you had some of your people give testimonials about the books they read, that you wrote, and how it changed them and what they benefited and and what they got out of it, that's going to really resonate with the other people who are just like them, versus if you came out and said, my books are great, my books are this and my books are that. And you could be telling the truth.
It doesn't matter.
But it's right. And so when we brag, people don't have the ability to come. And when I say brag, when we're truthfully sharing about our work, people don't accept that, at least in my experience and from what I understand. It's much more difficult for them to It's much more difficult for you to stimulate or trigger the internal decision process in their minds versus through story, which is another avenue to do this, which is you're the master of, or by having other people share their experiences, because then the people listening or watching those videos, the outcome-based video testimonials, i.e. social proof, can see themselves. They're listening to those stories, and there's an element of story in every one of these testimonial videos, which I never understood that until reading your work. But all I know is it works. It's like magic. You want to sell more stuff? Let your clients sell it for you. Let your customers, your patients, they don't have to be salesmen. Just let them share their stories because everybody is wired for story, like you've said. So did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one thing to kind of also hit hard on if you say how great what you're doing is, even if you're 100% right, 100%, and you could back it up and prove it. So you're just going to say it. When we hear a story, anybody's story, the first place the mind goes is to what is the agenda of the main character. And if that's you, and you're telling somebody about how great what you're doing is, we're thinking, what's your agenda? And what we think is, well, your agenda is to sell me something. So if that's your agenda, that means that I don't know if I can believe everything that you're saying, because your agenda isn't to be truthful. Your agenda, which isn't to say that you're not, but it's you've got a vested interest in what happens. So we're much less likely to believe someone who has a vested interest than we are in somebody who's just saying, this helped me so much. So yeah, I'd be very careful, because the other problem that people have when they say how great what they've done is, or how great their product or what, is that they're saying why it's great in their opinion. And other people might think it's great for a completely other reason. I mean, we make that mistake all the time, is we think that the way that we see the world is how everybody sees the world. So if we think it's great, and the reasons why we're looking for something, we've done something and we think it's good, might be the exact opposite, or even something that your audience doesn't care about. I've seen a lot of fundraising letters. I remember seeing one in particular. It was for an aquarium, and the letter was, we're really going to make this aquarium better, and we feel it's going to be so great because we're going to love it, and we're going to bring more people in, and we're going to feel. And the reader's thinking, well, I don't care what you feel.
Yeah.
I feel, and you're so focused on you're turning me off.
Absolutely.
So it really comes back to, but it takes a lot, as you probably say, it takes a lot of work, before you have a testimonial of somebody saying, why something was great, to really figure out both how your audience sees the world, the reason why they're not doing what you already want them to do, because there's some sort of a reason, there's something. And then what can you do, or what can you show them that's going to undo that without, and this is the real danger, without stepping on some deeply held belief that's only going to make them, like be your enemy and not listen to you, and perhaps even rail against you, or basically want to punch you in the nose. That really is so key. That's what my new book is about, actually, is all of this. I've been spending a lot of time diving into exactly that.
Okay, so I'm going to go off script here. And when I say go off script, I'm going to leave my questions for just a minute. I want to make one comment. I want to ask you about your new book for just a second, but I want to make this one comment because I think I told you I was in a head-on collision with a dump truck back in 1994, 18 surgeries, major brain injuries. That's one of the things, again, that led me to want to learn more about my brain. But having said that, you mentioned if you don't do this right, you could actually have people wanting to punch you in the nose and end up hating you. Well, I don't want people to end up wanting to punch me in the nose, or I don't want people to, hate on me. But I will say this. I intentionally craft my copy and the way I talk and the way I package myself and the work that I do to intentionally repel certain people. I'll give you an example. The people that I want to repel are people that they're not willing to do hard work. I don't want to work with people, and I want to repel those people who are always looking to blame others and never accept responsibility for themselves. I want to repel people who like to complain and gripe and things like that, and who aren't thankful for the help that they get or the things that you do for them. So that's just like a small snippet of the people. So I intentionally, and I think you're shaking your head vehemently, yes. So yeah, I go out of my way to repel people who are of a certain bent. I just don't want to work with. I don't care what their politics are, but they got to be like decent, hardworking people. If somebody's dishonest, I fire clients from time to time, and I work with 6-figure clients. So this is a big decision when I fire someone. And I just recently had to fire someone who I personally, on a personal level, I like all of the people I work with. I really like them, and I feel like I don't want to work with someone who I couldn't be friends with, but I don't typically establish friendships with my clients on on a real personal, deep level. I mean, I can be very friendly with them. I can do things with them. This was a person I felt like could be a very good friend of mine. And this person lied to me not only once, but twice over something they didn't have to lie about. And I had to end up firing them. And it was actually hurtful to me. And, people were like, you're absolutely nuts. You know how much money you just walked away from? I don't care. I got to be able to wake up in the morning and feel good about what I'm doing and who I'm working with. And if I feel like I'm working with someone who is an example, I had one guy a long time ago tell me that he was cheating on his wife. I couldn't keep working with him. I didn't want to be involved with someone. I thought, if you'll cheat on and be dishonest and take advantage and do somebody that bad who is supposed to be the closest person to you on the earth, what are you going to do to me? What are you doing to your clients? And so I just don't want to work with people like that. So I'm glad you brought that up. But now that I've kind of got that mantra out of the way, what's up with the new book? Because this has got me like, I want an advanced copy. I mean, when it's done, I would love it if I could. Robbie Kelman Baxter just gave me an advanced copy of her book. It just launched this week. So hopefully I think that's going really, really well. But if you have an advanced copy, I would love to get a hold of that for selfish reasons, obviously. Full disclosure. And then promote the heck out of it. I mean, I will promote the heck out of your books. In fact, I'm guaranteeing your books, if anybody buys, they will buy your books. Guys, if you want to become a master storyteller, I'll just get this out of the way. Buy either Wired for Story or Story Genius. Use the stuff that's in them. I don't care if you're going to be a writer, to use this in business. You will greatly, greatly improve your story selling skills, your storytelling skills, and make a lot more money and have a lot happier clients. And if you don't, after using these, if you can't say that, email me and I will buy one or both of those books from you. I'm guaranteeing fully the efficacy and the effectiveness and the just the brilliance of these two books. I want to get that out of the way. So tell us about your third book, because I just can't wait to hear about it.
Okay, the third book, and it's funny because what you just said, I have a section in it that almost verbatim says what you just said, figuring out who you don't want to work with. But it's called, at least at this moment, it's called Story or Die: How to Use Brain Science to Create Your Own Story to Persuade, Convince, and Inspire. And it really is story for the business world, the nonprofit world, even if you're trying to convince your team not to text and drive world. In other words, all of us. And so that's what it goes into. It goes into the same brain science. In some ways, it goes slightly deeper than the other books because more stuff has happened since I wrote them. And because I really want to make the point, I would say a third of it really goes deeply into the brain science of how we make decisions, why we make the decisions we do, why we pay attention to some people and not, literally how we're wired to make sense of things, and literally why, and I think this is really important for everybody, why it is that we'll fight back. Why it is that we are so wired to be tribal. And I don't mean that pejoratively at all, but we are wired that way, and there's no way to undo that wiring. So understanding the way that our wiring is sort of pushing us, and understanding the way that we're wired, so how your audience might be hearing what you're saying and why they feel that way, not because they're stubborn or willful or just ignorant, but because it's literally how they've been wired since they were very small. So understanding that both helps you understand everybody in your life, actually, but also people who you are trying to persuade or convince to, hire you or buy something that you've done. And it also helps you understand how you make decisions, because stories basically, have an effect on us. Every story you hear affects you in one way or another, whether you're aware of it or not. And the scary thing is, usually we're not aware of it. So it really goes into that brain science. It goes into why facts don't really grab us, why facts literally will not convince anybody of anything unless it plugs into a story they've already got. Why? And this is the other big thing, that what story does is story takes, big, dry facts, abstract concepts, abstract or vague ideas, and it translates them into something really, really specific, so that your prospect, so that it can affect you in the one biological system by which we make every decision that we ever make. And this might come as a big surprise, but that's emotion. Emotion is a biological system, and it's not like reason versus emotion at all. They are flip sides of the same coin. And actually, the truth is that if you couldn't feel emotion, you couldn't make a single rational decision. Emotion has gotten such a bad rap. It is not, it tends to be brought down to the term, which is used pejoratively, emotional, as if that is a bad thing. And you want to make a decision, you're gonna marshal all the facts, figures, data, and you're gonna analyze it dispassionately in the cold light of objective reason.
Doesn't happen.
And, right. And we're told when we do that, what you want to do is you want to keep emotion at bay because it's going to creep in and cloud your judgment. And the truth is, emotion is your judgment. In other words, emotion is the way that we took information in, and then that emotion slams into you and lets you know the meaning of things. And the meaning of things isn't something that we have a priori or that we all see the same meaning. We all see meaning in things and read meaning into things based on one thing and one thing alone. And that's what our past experiences taught us. And so each of us, if you look at how can you not, how completely polarized this country is at the moment, and you can look at any one thing happening and you have two groups coming at it and reading the exact opposite meaning into it. No meaning comes a priori. It comes from what our tribes have taught us when we're tiny, when we're trying to figure out how the world works. Because biologically, that's what we needed to do, back in the day. But back in the day, the world was obviously far simpler. We're wired to live in a world that we don't live in anymore. So now there's just so much to deconstruct. So basically, that's what the book is about. It dives into that so we really have a deep understanding of the way that, literally the way the brain works and the way that people are making decisions. And then that goes into the next section is literally on trying to figure out who your audience is, how they see the world, and how you can then make your point given the way that they see the world. And the point is, of course, your call to action. And then the last section of the book is how to create a story, and given those parameters. And then we go through. So if you were looking to create a story, whether it's an ad, whether it's a donation letter, whether it's literally trying to get your kid to stop texting and driving, please don't text and drive, it will take you through writing your own story, creating your own story for that. And again, when I say story, and that's what I said originally, I don't mean a big, long saga, or novel. I mean, literally just, what you might say. It could be a 15-second spot.
Right.
It could be it could be 3 sentences. It could be a tweet. It could be a text.
You talked about, it sounds almost like in a very roundabout way, in certainly a much more sophisticated way. You're talking about all the things that the tribal experience we've gone through has literally, it sounds like imprinting what I used to do with my, what I do with my young horses. When I have a horse, a mare, and I get a colt or, a little filly colt or a stud colt out of them, I imprint those horses, meaning I go in and grab them, their ears, and get them used to being touched and handled so that when they weigh 1,200 pounds, they don't hurt me because they're very skittish animals. And so on a much more sophisticated level, we're talking about human imprinting that occurs just through the experience of being human and living in the tribe of people or around the different types of people, the environments where we've grown up. And so that's something people don't consider, but it's really relevant. It's very, very important. And emotion really, I think the first time I really understood this, and like I said, it was a superficial understanding, but you really opened my eyes when I read Wired for Story. I interviewed a guy named, I forgot his name, it's Paul something. When I first started this podcast, his company's name is Emotive Analytics. And he was telling me then, he's a researcher. He does, for Fortune 500 companies, he does research on emotional triggers that get people to buy more stuff. But he's like, it's emotion. It's all emotion. It's all emotion. And at the time, I'm like, okay, whatever. And the more I read, and after reading your work, I'm like, man, this is pure genius. This is stuff I have to learn. So let's do this just for the sake of time. How you doing on time?
I'm fine.
Okay, cool. So am I. I just want to make it, I may split this into 2 episodes. I may not. I'm not sure yet. But let's do this. Kind of split this into 3 segments. If we could take the first part of the conversation from here moving forward, let's talk about kind of what a story is, what it's not. And then from there, we'll talk about a little more brain science. And then the third part, we'll talk about some applications that could be made in the business setting, So if you could, what is a story? Tell us what exactly a story is, because I think a lot of people they share information thinking they're telling a story when in fact they're sharing an experience possibly, but it's not a story.
Right. I'm going to give you to talk about it. Let me just give you the same thing I would say to writers, and we'll dive into that just because we can go.
Yeah.
So the story is about what happens. Now, what happens is the plot. It's the surface of the story, is that event that is going to take place. And as I say to writers, if I leave you with nothing, it would be this. The story is not about the plot. The story is not about a thing that happens. That's why it was up to me, and this is incendiary both literally and figuratively. I would take every story structure book, and I know that in business they use this often, starting with a hero's journey on up, and I would burn them. Because for one thing, it's a misnomer. It's not story structure, it's plot structure. And it implies that if you come up with a bunch of things that happen, then you have a story. And you don't. You absolutely don't. So it's how what happens affects someone. That someone is the protagonist. It's the person that the story is happening to. It is, if you're telling a story about yourself, it's you. As we probably all know, when you're telling stories in the business world, very often the protagonist actually is your audience. They are the people that it's going through, even though the protagonist in any story is, in fact, an avatar for your audience. So how it happens is the plot affects someone. That is your protagonist, your avatar, your audience, in pursuit of a difficult goal. And that is something they often call the story question or the plot problem. They've been putting through something difficult, and the story is about change. And here's the thing. All change is hard. That's why when you ask someone in the business world or any world to change, you're asking them to do something we're wired not to do. We're wired to really, as much as possible, stand pat, because even if we're in a bad situation, that's why we stick with the devil right?
It's predictable.
Right. We know how to deal with it. It could be worse out there. So it's about how somebody deals with something difficult, that plot problem. So it's how what happens, that's the plot, affects someone. That's the character. That's who we're really identifying with. As I said earlier, they've done fMRI studies that show when you're lost in a story, same areas of your brain light up that would light up if you were doing what that character is doing. And what you're looking for is why they're doing it. Who is this person? First thing we look for in a story, who is the main character? And when I say story, again, to be really clear, this was from research done with somebody reading just headlines. Who is this about? What are they feeling? What do they want? What's their motive? What's going on here? So we have a context to make sense of this big thing that's happening. So it's again, I know I'm getting ahead of myself. How what happens is the plot to someone, that's the main character, in pursuit of a difficult goal. That is the thing that they are being forced to deal with. They've been knocked out of their comfort zone. And now this is the key point. And how they change internally as a result. And that, my friends, is what your story is about. Story is not about an external change. Story is about an internal change. It's about how what happens externally forces this person to change how they see things internally, either then to realize how to solve the problem or to realize that the problem was something very different than what they thought it was, to see that differently. And that's what story is about. Story is about an internal change. And here's the key thing, and why coming at stories starting at the first, if you're writing, if you're doing copywriting, the first moment of that particular story, if you're writing a novel, page 1, is that the story begins long before that, because that character has to come in needing to make a change, and you need to know what that change is. Change from what to what, which goes to all the research that you need to do first, so that you are sure that the character is created so that they need to make that change, and that you want that change to be the change that you want your audience to make. That's why it's so much more goal directed when your story is, copywriting or advertising or commercial or a donation letter or whatever, because you have to understand deeply why that character, what that belief system is that's holding them back from doing it to begin with. And then you have to show them both. This is the tricky part. You have to show them why it's actually holding them back and keeping them from getting what they want. But you have to do that without stepping on such gut level, hard held beliefs that you're going to just alienate them, and they're going to think, oh, you don't know anything about me. You don't know the first thing about me. And then they're going to bail, which is why you really have to understand that. So that's what story is. That's what story does. It takes us, and then in a novel or in a few sentences, scene by scene by scene by scene. It takes us through a character dealing with whatever that problem is. And internally, it makes them struggle with what I call their misbelief being the reason why they're not already doing what it is that you want them to do. And the external makes them struggle with that until finally they see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. Can I put you on the spot here? And if you can do this, great. I would love it. And if you can't do it or we don't have enough time, that's great as well. Can you give us an example of in a sales setting, and you could sell, I don't care what it is, a car. I mean, not a car. We don't deal with car dealers here or car salesmen. That's a bad example. Whatever. Just a basic sales situation, maybe selling a piece of artwork where someone does it the wrong way, and then how would it be done the right way? And you can make this as overly simplistic as you want to kind of illuminate this in a business setting so we can see this in our mind's eye, if that makes sense.
The easiest way for me to do that, even if you were a writer, you said come up with a story this way or that way without giving me the parameters of what it was. That would be difficult. But what I can do is take one or two. The first one is a very simple one, comes to mind, commercials. And
okay.
One that does work and one that doesn't work.
Perfect. That works.
Okay. So which do you want first, the one that does or the one that doesn't?
Let's do the one that does not work first.
Okay. I'll tell you the story about this one. Okay. I, like you, I mean, I don't watch much TV, and I admit to not watching commercials in their like actual habitat, environment, meaning, during some sort of show. But I was in a movie theater and I was watching a movie, and before the movie started, this commercial came on, and it made me so angry. I was screaming at the screen. And later on, I was talking to a business group in Austin, Texas, who asked sort of a similar question that you did. And I said, well, what I just said, I don't watch much, but I did see this. I talked about this commercial, and everybody went, one guy in particular went, oh my God, yes, I had that exact, my wife walked out. She was so angry. Because it really is deeply, it just doesn't work. And it's a commercial for Diet Coke. So do you want me just to play the audio of it right now?
Sure, if you want to, yeah.
Okay, so I can totally do that. Let me be sure this is as loud as it gets. And you might have seen this one. So let's see, is it going to start at the beginning?
Look, here's the thing about Diet Coke. It's delicious. It makes me feel good. Life is short. If you want to live in a yurt it up. If you want to run a marathon, I mean, that sounds super hard, but okay. I mean, just do you, whatever that is. And if you're in the mood for a Diet Coke, have a Diet Coke. Diet Coke. Because I can.
Okay. And that's the commercial.
People get paid to write that?
That's the commercial. The problem with it is she sounds utterly defensive from the get-go. It's like she's arguing with someone who's told her, you shouldn't drink Diet Coke. It's really bad for you. So she's saying, yeah, because I can, because it's delicious. If you want to, you can drink it. So already we're thinking, why is she so defensive? Who is she arguing with? And then when she says, if you want to live in a yurt it up. And you're thinking, is somebody say something bad about yurts too? Like, is there some anti-yurt movement? And then she goes into and if you want to run a marathon, I mean, that sounds super hard, but go ahead. Again, not only does she sound defensive, but she sounds like she's about to say how hard math is at that point. And then when she says, just be whoever, so I don't think it's just do you. Sounds like something you should probably do with the shades down behind closed doors. Like, what does she even mean? Again, it sounds like she's giving you permission to do something that someone has told you not to do. I think they pulled it down. It got a lot of social media did not like it. It did not do well at all. But I think that's a commercial that really, really doesn't work because it sounds defensive. It sounds like they're arguing against somebody who's already told you not to do something. And so when you're pulled into it, you're thinking, instead of thinking, well, yeah, okay, good. She's giving me permission to drink Diet Coke. You're thinking, maybe there's some reason why I shouldn't. Because why is she sounding that way? The fact that she's also stick thin, and you think, why does she even need to drink a Diet Coke? So that would be one that absolutely doesn't work. There's another one that doesn't work that was literally pulled down right when social media was first taking off. It was a Motrin commercial. It was just graphics, and basically it implied it was when women started to wear babies in slings and in backpacks, and it implied, and it was about backaches, because granted, if you have a baby in a sling or a backpack, it might, hurt your back. but the ad went on to say that the reason that women were wearing babies that way was because it was a fashion statement, because it made them feel like a real mom. It was immediately pulled back. I mean, it was really one of those ads where you think, okay, the person who wrote this was definitely not a mom with a baby in a sling. So, I mean, social media, it's funny when you go back and read the articles about it at the time, because social media was so new that it took so little to pull it down, because that's all there was. But those would be two where they really did not know their audience. They really, one sounded defensive, one just clearly didn't know. And, I was reading some of the tweets that went through, and one woman had tweeted, this is so offensive that even my husband hated it and thought, what's wrong with them? It was just, definitely did not.
Arrogant, condescending, out of touch, superficial. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
But it was like they were looking at what they thought, and they just
they don't value their audience enough to do the research.
Right. And I think that's really again, to do the research, but also I think even when you do the research, you still have to step out of the notion that the way that you see it is what it is. And that is really hard, not because, we're jerks or stubborn or purposely arrogant, but because it's like that old David Foster Wallace. Do you know he did this really wonderful thing. It was a commencement speech, and there's a really wonderful, shortened 9-minute video on it called "This Is Water." Do you know that one?
Off the top of my head, no.
It's really brilliant. But it starts with this, it's I guess an old joke of two young fish are swimming around, and an older fish comes up and says, hey guys, how's the water? And they just look, and then the fish swims away, and one fish turns to the other and goes, what's water? And we don't realize that the way that we see the world is the water that we're swimming in, as opposed to the way things really are. Our water is what we've been wired to see, and the meaning that we've been wired to read into things, the meaning that we write into things comes from us. It isn't in that thing itself.
Right. NLP, the map is not the territory. It's the map. It's what we perceive of our environment. It's not the reality of the environment. It's our interpretation of the experiences we've had within that. That's basic. That's high level copywriting stuff, but I guess that's pretty relevant to story as well.
Oh, 100%. Because that's what you need to know about every character you've got. Why are they doing what they're doing? And it always goes much deeper than what it looks like on the surface.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up part 1 of the interview with Lisa Cron, best-selling author of the book Story Genius. We're going to have her back in episode number 350. Our next episode of the Get Clients Now podcast is going to be with David J.P. Phillips. David J.P. Phillips has given multiple, I think it's 3, talks at TEDx, and he's got over 20 million views of his videos online on story. He's got one on the death of PowerPoint, and the other 2 are on how to tell compelling, magnetic, irresistible stories to get people to take action and buy your stuff. So we're going to have David J.P. Phillips on episode 349. And for now, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you guys then.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.